We believe that collaborative conversations will lead to better outcomes in the world of mental health. Welcome to the Lift and Make Lighter podcast.
So my name is Shawn Warren. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner at Levo. I'm the clinical director at the Kaysville location. Today I'm with Kyle Barth, who is a marriage and family therapist. Yeah. And today we're super excited to have you here so we could talk about just a little bit more about your expertise. And we thought we could talk a little bit about connection and how the world perceives it now. But before we jump into that, do you mind just introducing yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. So, licensed marriage and family therapist, founded Impactful Counseling 7 years ago now, and really just specialized in relationship therapy and trauma therapy. So that's what we do. And most importantly, outside of that, I'm a dad, and I'd say that's the most important role to me. So
that's awesome. So definitely talking about connection then. So as a dad, especially nowadays, do you feel like it's kind of harder for parents to be involved and really make that connection with their kids? And I don't know, I feel like there's so many distractions going on nowadays. But what has your experience been with that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of just intentionality. There are so many different things that can pull your attention, right? From a smartphone to work to TV to friends to there's so much there. But I think the more you're able to just be present with people, to listen longer, to just observe, I think that creates more connection, even just in those parenting moments. And I think too, we never actually know the value of a moment. Like, moments and experience matter, like with parents with their kids, but unfortunately and fortunately, we don't get to pick which moments matter most. They do. And so we never know what's actually going to create the biggest impact for them.
Wow, that's really good. I like that. I'm thinking of ways that I can be better as a parent already with my kids. So this might be more of a therapy session for me. So I think that's awesome. I love how you said that. We can't really choose which moments are going to be the most impactful for somebody. Yeah. Because I even thinking back on when I was growing up, some of the times when I thought was most impactful for me, my parents never even really felt like it was that big of a deal during that time. Yeah. Whereas maybe they tried to plan something really, really big or made this really impressive, vacation or something like that was supposed to be so much more meaningful, but that wasn't as much of a connection building opportunity as some of the other experiences that I've had. So I love that. That's really interesting. As a marriage and family therapist, what do you feel like is some of the barriers that are maybe impacting relationships? You mentioned some of them already, like phones and stuff like that. But when you're in with your clients, do you feel like there's a pattern that has been shown to be a little bit more challenging for people in 2026?
Yeah, I think it's a complicated answer to that question of like what impacts relationships, or people are so individual. So I think like a couple thoughts of one, people don't know what they don't know. So one thing over the past probably 4 or 5 years, I've been really focused on listening longer, listening to the voices of people who's been suppressed, who's been harmed, who may have been in abusive relationships and had hard things happen. And so one of the things I think is really important, even before we dive into like other relationship dynamics and topics, is just acknowledging that abuse is real, and it comes in many forms, like emotional and psychological, financial, spiritual, physical, sexual, and the pattern and process of abuse that can play out. And so, like, as we're talking about these other forms of connection, right? If someone's in an abusive relationship, most of these things don't actually apply there. And the traditional relationship therapy, that book you're reading, that podcast you're listening to, it's not for you. It's not going to help. And so there's other places you can go and get help for that. And so if that's even a question in your mind, like, reach out to a therapist. You can reach out to resources online to make sure. But from there, I think what I mean by make sure is to get the support and help you need. Safety is the priority, not a priority. And so understanding that. And I think people just, in many ways, they don't know how to connect in healthy ways with other people. They don't even know how to connect in a healthy way with themselves. And so sometimes they're projecting their emotions onto other people or wanting them to manage them. Sometimes they're avoiding things and they don't know why I'm avoiding, or I'm distracting through technology. I'm distracting through Instagram or TikTok or my work, or substances, where really they're just uncomfortable with themselves, maybe, and maybe uncomfortable truly connecting with other people. It can be scary, but also really rewarding.
Yeah. You know, I really like what you said about how we at times can have a hard time connecting with ourselves. Why do you feel like that is? Do you feel like there's, yeah, I guess, why do you feel like that is? And I know that's an individual and very broad question because it's going to be different for each person, but
Yeah.
I guess kind of feeding a little bit more into that. What do you think?
Yeah. Most people that I have talked with, whether it's just friendships, clients, people I know, most people have like some fears, some core negative beliefs they'd have about themselves. And everyone phrases a little bit different. It may sound something like, I'm not good enough, or I'm a failure, or I'm too much, or I'm not lovable. And the truth is, like, sometimes we're not lovable. Like, there's been moments in my life when I haven't been the most lovable teddy bear around. Like, but that doesn't mean that I'm not lovable as a person. There's moments where maybe I wasn't enough. I could have done more. I should have done more, but I didn't or wasn't able to in that moment. But that doesn't mean that I'm not enough as a person. And so I think there's a lot of shame that can come into play of people defining themselves by their mistakes or what's happened to them, as opposed to being able to learn and move forward, kind of moving inward to find wisdom and moving forward in their life. And so I think it's really uncomfortable to sit with the parts of ourselves that we don't like and to learn to love them and to embrace them and give them space in our life, while also taking accountability and responsibility for that too. And that opens up the door to connect, because if we're looking to connect, what we're saying is we're opening ourselves up to vulnerability, which is a buzzword anywhere online. But literally what that means is that I'm putting myself in a position where I can get hurt. So why would I do that? I avoid it. So I avoid the parts of myself that I don't want to get hurt. I get defensive in relationships, or I go into fix-it mode. Because if not, what does that mean about me? I don't want to sit in that discomfort. But when we can, and we can get vulnerable, it opens up the door to the pain, to the rejection, to the loss, but also to the acceptance, to the love, to the connection, to the intimacy as well. And so I think that's what makes it hard for people. They don't know how to do that, but also it's a scary place to go to truly sit with yourself and love yourself at a deep level.
Yeah, I love that. You know, when I'm working with my clients, you know, a lot of the mental illnesses I see is like, I feel like it's very protective. Like, for example, with anxiety, it's like, well, I have maybe a social anxiety. Well, I don't want to go into these social settings because that's an area where you're going to have to be vulnerable. And then, so it's much easier just to avoid it. So It makes total sense what you're saying, is that in these, the ability to connect with ourselves is going to have to open up that door. And that is scary. That makes total sense. How do you, I was going to ask you how you feel, how would you define like a real connection with, like, either in a relationship or even a friendship, or like, what is true connection, do you feel like? What would that look like?
Yeah. So what is true connection? I think I'm going to answer first of what it's not.
I like that.
So one of the questions I'll ask every single couple before I ever work with them is like, what would a successful outcome look like? What are you looking for? And the number one answer is improved communication. That's what people present for couples counseling for. We just want to improve how we're talking. So if we could just talk better, if they could just understand me, then things would be better. But that's not even necessarily what they're needing. Most of the time, they're really good at communicating. Like, they've communicated pretty well with each other. But what they're longing for beneath the surface is that they want to feel safe, physically safe and emotionally safe with someone else at a deep level. They want to be able to experience that connection where it's safe for me to be me and to be in a space with someone else. They want to feel confident in who they are and confident in how they live their life independently and confident in their relationship with a partner, even with a friendship. And they want to be able to like have fun. Like adults need playtime too. They need to be able to kind of let their inner child come out and play. And in romantic relationships, that can come out through sex, through adventures, through so many areas. And adults need that playtime and that deep safety and confidence and trust in their relationship. I've never had anyone share that answer of what would a successful outcome look like, what would healthy connection look like. I think that's really what everyone's longing for. And really, if we break that down, they want that security. They want connection. They want to know that they matter to themselves and to someone else, that I'm not too much. You can sit with me in this moment, in this pain. You don't have to fix me. You don't have to pull away or withdraw. We can just be together.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of what I'm hearing is the theme of safety and protection. And that's what I think we're all kind of longing for, it seems like. We're all human.
Yeah.
We all want to feel like people care about us. And one thing you mentioned earlier, you said that, I think sometimes we need to hear some, what am I trying to say? I think sometimes what we need to hear is the truth. And sometimes that's falls onto the therapist, and sometimes that's a little uncomfortable at times. But like you said, that maybe sometimes not all of us is always lovable. Not all of those situations are lovable. And I think that there's a perfectionistic quality within a lot of us that, well, if we're not fully, if we're not always approachable, if we're not always lovable, or if we're not always in the best mindset, that's when that shame and guilt comes in.
Yeah.
I don't know, have you seen that to be enlightening for any of your clients when you bring that up? It's like, hey, just because, you do these, it doesn't mean these situations are always the best for the relationship. But I don't know, how do you feel like that when you portray those kind of things? Is it well received, or is that pretty challenging when patients hear that kind of constructive criticism, really? So
Yeah. It depends on if someone's in a place that they're able and ready to hear that. Like the cave that we fear to enter holds the treasure that we seek. And so when I think about what's the foundation of therapy, in a lot of ways, it's creating a space where someone's able to be honest with themselves. And when they're able to do that, and maybe they can come to that conclusion themselves or it's shared with them, I think it's freeing, actually, because they're not being told something they didn't know. They've opened up something that they've feared, and they can sit with it and learn to love that. And that usually comes from like attachment injuries. Maybe it came from needs that weren't met as a kid growing up, or some abuse they've experienced. And could be a big traumatic event. It could be things that were just a series of times when my needs weren't met. People weren't there for me, the things that didn't happen when I did need it. And so then they can learn to kind of give themselves the loving hug that they needed at the moments they never got it. And they can learn to live and show up differently in relationships. So instead of, right, the function of the symptom, the social anxiety, or the defensiveness in a relationship, or the blame shifting, or the withdrawal and avoidance and shutting down and fix it, people pleasing, all the symptoms that can come out, they can learn to respond differently, to go back and say, hey, I didn't show up as my best self yesterday, and that was wrong. And I'm sorry, I can see that hurt you. Can you help me understand your pain and how we can heal moving forward together? Because I'm not going to continue to behave like that.
I think that's a very powerful statement, and I think that it even can be used in the family dynamics, especially from parents maybe to children as well. Being able to be vulnerable and tell your kids, hey, maybe I didn't respond in the way I should have, but I'm trying to fix that. From my understanding, that's a way to help teach your kids as well how to cope when we do make mistakes as well too.
Yeah.
Do you feel like each time seems different? Obviously we're most familiar with right now, but historically, comparing like how technology has adapted and changed through the years, do you feel like it's harder for parents to connect with their kids at all with that, or do you feel like there's other factors or dynamics that are preventing the connection from happening with children? Maybe I'm overstepping. Maybe that's not a factor, but it just seems like maybe that is something going on.
Well, when you look at the research, right, you can even trace this back to when the smartphone came out. And there's data that even shows kind of back before that of some of the technology and trends changing. But you look at the smartphone, you look at apps, and you look at social media, the data is pretty clear that there's a dramatic increase in symptoms of anxiety, of symptoms of depression, and suicidality, especially among kids and among adults in that time. And so supposedly in this time where you can instantly connect with anyone, it's the most disconnected time, like the loneliest time, that people are pulling away from these deep in-person conversations that we're having right now, to commenting online, to hitting a like button, to these algorithms that are, designed in essence to make money, to get people coming back more and more, instead of being present, instead of learning to sit with myself, instead of learning to be with the kids. And attention spans are shorter for kids, for adults. The ability to tolerate discomfort and distress and to work through hard things, right? There's data showing that's kind of decreased as well. So I think there is a correlation there for sure of those things and how that's affecting kids. And now, and we could even look at AI now. How's that going to affect things where if someone can supposedly perfect something, I shouldn't say someone, so I'm even falling into that, something can perfectly understand you or give you the perfect validation or insight in a way that no one else in your real life can, what does that do to you? What does that do to your actual relationships, to how you think about yourself and how you show up? I don't know the answers to those questions, but it's certainly impacting people individually and connection of relationships. And so I think it takes a lot of intentionality to turn screens off, to put phones away, to sit just with yourself, let alone to sit with your kids.
Yeah. I think I was going to ask you what you felt like could be a first step. So say there's somebody listening right now that wants to improve that connection maybe with their children.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, you kind of already mentioned it, that you said, we just need to put the phone down and be with ourselves first. It almost reminds me of when we're on like an airplane and it's like, well, you got to grab the mask for yourself before you can grab it for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's tough to be able to guide your children to a certain way if you yourself are not prepared to do so as well. So I appreciate you saying that. And what else do you feel like can help people to be more mindful of that, of how technology is affecting them? And if they were like, hey, Kyle, I have challenges with my kids right now. I'm putting down the phone. I'm doing everything I can, but it's really hard to get them to connect with me. They're just mainly interested in technology and they just don't really want to give me much time. And that's probably common for a lot of kids and parents is kids don't always want to hang out with their parents. But I guess what would you recommend? What would be some first steps to help them to get there?
Yeah, I can kind of think of 3 different things. So one of like how to spend more time with your kids. Like sometimes it's like the idea of playing 35 rounds of Uno sounds like hell. Or if I have to play Barbies for 1 more hour, I'm going to lose my mind. But like create mutually enjoyable experiences with your kids. Something that they'll enjoy and you'll enjoy, because you're going to be happier, going to be able to show up in that moment and start there. And then I think really when you look at any type of relationship, whether this is like parent-child, whether it's a romantic relationship, a friendship, healthy relationships are really about learning to love yourself at deeper levels in ways you never knew possible. And as you do that, you're able to show up for other people in completely different ways. So the more you can love yourself as a parent, for example, that's what your kids really need, because you're going to have the patience and the bandwidth to hold space for their emotions, allowing them to not be okay. And it's not about you. For you to be able to apologize and own whatever you need to own with your kids to strengthen that relationship and that connection. So I think as you can do that in your own personal work, that's really the greatest thing you can do for any relationship that you're in, and the only thing you can actually control. And then I think the third thing, if you want to test out your relationship with technology, like either go to a place where there's no cell phone or internet connection and you have to sit in silence for a day and see what happens to you. Get rid of your phone, forget it at work for a week, and see how you respond throughout the day. And I think you'll learn really quickly how bad of a relationship you have with technology, how bad of a relationship you have with your phone when it's just not there, and how much you're actually relying on it.
Wow. Yeah, that's good instruction. I think probably most of us could probably do that. I think of myself doing that, and it feels like it would be a pretty uncomfortable experience, actually.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, what messages did I just miss? Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
So No, I appreciate that feedback. That's awesome. Uh, let's see here. One thing that I was also wondering, what do you feel like? This is a little bit more of a maybe a sensitive topic that I was going to ask you about. But what do you feel like are some of the? We've talked about technology and stuff, but what do you feel like are some of the maybe current variables that are almost destroying relationships? What are some really toxic things that people may not recognize? Maybe they're not even that blatantly seen. Maybe they're smaller, but they're really actually having pretty significant impacts on relationships. And that's the first part I was wondering about.
Yeah, I mean that could take a lot of different directions, right? Of you look at society and culture as a whole, and it's so polarized, and I think people don't recognize and see how much that affects them. I think you can look at any type of misogynistic, patriarchal, bigoted, like these different types of beliefs and how they show up that may not be people are even aware of how that affects them or how that may be influencing themselves and how they show up. And so I think there's less self-awareness that people have now. A lot of people think that they're self-aware, but they're actually not. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that people run into. And sometimes their own inability to sit in their own pain, to do their own work, and it comes out sideways. And sideways can look a lot of different ways, but sideways usually hurts.
Yeah, no, I think that. So I heard something recently. I can't remember where I heard it from, but they had mentioned that as humans nowadays and what we experience, it said that we tend we're usually better at explaining emotions rather than actually feeling them. We can talk about them with distancing ourselves essentially. Yeah. But what you're recommending is just improving that self-awareness, really taking a step back and recognizing what are my areas or my faults or maybe my even biases that could be influencing my relationships. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
Yeah, exactly. And those things play out like on the largest stages in the world right now, and every level of things that's shown as okay or what's not okay and what's happening. And so like I think it's just so ingrained at every level, like these harmful systems, harmful structures, harmful biases, that it's not okay. And I think those on every level, micro, macro, individual, systemic, that I think we really have to listen longer to ourselves and learn to be more honest with ourselves, and to see how can we create more safety in our world? How can we create more connection? And what does it actually mean to show up in a healthy way? What does it even mean to be healthy? Yeah. I think there's so much we can all reflect on to change ourselves.
I love that. Sometimes just being with somebody and feeling that true connection can be very healing for someone. And that's why I love, referring some clients to therapy, especially with therapists that I know that I feel like can actually make that connection with them. That true connection I've seen to be so powerful and healing for people. So, and that it makes sense why it would still be the same for somebody in a relationship. We need that connection.
Yeah.
If we want relationships to flourish or even just to be good enough, we've got to have that connection. So, let's see here. I was going to ask you as well. Well, do you have other things that you wanted to share before? I feel like I'm just asking you.
Go
so
for
much.
it. This is great. I can take the conversation in so many directions.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna see, how do you feel like going back to like relationships, and how do you feel like maybe a couple could understand maybe the difference of being just too distracted from each other rather than necessarily growing apart from each other? Or vice versa. Maybe it's not the distraction and we actually are growing apart from each other. As a marriage and family therapist, I'm assuming we want relationships to always work out, but that's not always for the best probably at times, or maybe they shouldn't work out. So, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but just from what I've seen, but what do you feel like you could give advice about with growing apart versus just being distracted from each other?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. So I think one, like, just as you never step in the same river twice, you never meet the same person twice. And oftentimes, the longer you're in a relationship with someone, the less you know them, because you're making judgments and playing connect the dots based off of the past, how they showed up before, how things played out, not who they are right now. So you have to be very curious and not judgmental. And I think too, and I usually tell this to couples that I work with in the very first session, like, divorce breaking up is a very viable option. Like, this doesn't make the relationship work at all costs. Some costs are too high. Some costs are too harmful. And is this what you actually want? What's actually safe for you? What's actually connecting for you? What actually aligns with your values to be able to learn to grow? And when you let go of the outcome, you can actually begin to connect and relate differently to yourself and to someone else to see what do healthy boundaries look like for me. And when I use that term, I mean, what do I need to do to keep myself in a healthy and safe place? Not what do I need the other person to do differently? How are they going to change? You have expectations. What am I going to do different? And how am I going to create this connection for me to help a relationship grow and be healthy? So, like, am I just distracted or am I growing apart? Like, for couples, like, I don't even know if they need to know the answer to that, rather than just the way our relationship is right now, it's not working for us. And right, as John Gottman would say, when he looks at kind of marriages, they often end in one of two ways. Like, they either get divorced or they stay together, but they get divorced. They have this parallel relationship. We're business partners together. We're parents together, but we don't actually have honesty. There's not intimacy. There's not safety. There's not deep connection. There may be respect. There may be some love and some friendship, but it's not like a romantic connection. And that takes vulnerability daily, which is scary, because again, that means every single day I'm putting myself and choosing to put myself in a position where I could get hurt, letting go of the outcome of that. And so I could lose this relationship every single day, knowing that if I love deeply, loss will come, whether that's through death, whether it's through a breakup, something significantly changing. But when I approach that level of vulnerability every single day, what that means is I can also see and love myself in a deeper way. I can be chosen and loved authentically for who I am right then and there. And that's beautiful. That's intimacy. That's what that actually is about.
I love that. You know, a couple things that I feel like I heard from you on that is, one, I love the being curious. I feel like that curiosity does diminish over time in relationships, unfortunately. Like, when you start dating somebody, it's like that curiosity is super high. You're super excited. You want to know everything about them. But as time goes on, that curiosity starts to decrease. So really focusing on involving that in the relationship is awesome. And then I forgot what the other thing was.
It's okay. I just said a lot of stuff. So,
but the curiosity thing is quite awesome, actually. So, there was one other thing I was going to try to say, but it's a good thing this is edited. So, I don't remember what it was now. So, sorry about that. It'll come back, I'm sure. So,
all good.
It's great. Do you have any questions before we move forward a little bit more?
No, I don't think I have any questions. I think like one thing I'll just go back to for a second of like breaking up is a viable option, divorce is an option, like really letting go of the outcome, which is a scary thing because of the meaning people give to that. But when you can truly let go of the outcome of something, like you start to focus on what you can actually do. How am I showing up? What do I need to change? What do I need to do different? And you start to trust yourself more. I don't need the other person to change. I can't change them. I don't need them to understand something different. I need to understand myself and understand the situation. And then I can trust myself to make the best decisions for me and the best decision for a relationship if that's what I'm choosing.
I love that. So that's exactly what I was actually going to talk to you about is that acceptance, being able to let go. So our brains, from what I've seen, they're very, like I said, they're very protective, and they want to know the outcome. They don't like uncertainty. Mm-hmm. But if we're able to accept that, there's multiple options of what could happen with this, and we're going to just do everything we can now to make this relationship work or not work, depending on where they're at in the relationship. I'm assuming that this is a complete assumption, so you tell me if I'm right or wrong, but when a couple comes to you for maybe a therapy session, either they both are frustrated and they both want to make the relationship work, or maybe it's just one person in the relationship wants to make it work and the other one is not invested in it. Is that kind of what you see? Or maybe they both are there and neither of them actually want to be there at all and have no interest. But is that kind of what you see, or is that different?
Yeah, I think it looks a little bit different for every couple. Like if they're showing up and willing to do the work in couples therapy, there's typically a level of investment there. And I'll even share with couples, I'll ask them like on a scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you? Like 10, we're going to make this work no matter what. 1, like we're actually done, just checking a box. And I'll share with them like there's only 2 answers I care about. Like if you said a 1, because what are we doing here? Or if you said a 10, because there's situations where, again, it may harm you. It's not good, safe, healthy for you to try and make this relationship work. And so usually what you'll see is the person who cares the least controls the most. So if I'm 2 steps farther out than you are, there's kind of maybe a more sense of safety that person has, or they may have more influence over certain dynamics of the relationship, right? So them leaning in and being more vulnerable, they may feel like I have more to lose. And so I'm going to protect myself and be a little bit more guarded than the other person who's like, I need to make this work like at all costs, right? And they may be over functioning. So you kind of see those pursuing and withdrawing patterns play out, anxious and avoidant attachment styles that, yeah, those are definitely there.
I love what you said. So you said the person that cares the least controls the most.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful statement. So, no, I appreciate you following up on that, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you a little bit more about. So, I had another question for you. So, going back to the curiosity, what are some daily things that you feel like could kind of spark that curiosity? What could you do that could help him build that connection back up and that curiosity? Is there any recommendations you would have?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different fun things you can do. And I think too, like, if you find yourself getting defensive and more frustrated in your relationship, that's a signal I need to get very curious with myself and with my partner. So things you can do to just open up curiosity, to start to get to know each other again within the relationship. Like one, like sit down together and make a list of 5 things you're going to do for each other to say, I love you over the next week. Don't show the list. This isn't a 7th grade math test you're trying to get a good grade on, right?
Yeah.
But make the list. And then over the next week, you each do those things. And every single day, ask yourself the question, what did my partner do today to make me feel loved? Don't tell them it's not like I just did something, or was that on the list? That was it, huh? But just do those things and see what you notice. See what comes out. And then notice, like, what happened for me? How did I feel loved? And after a week, kind of come back together and you can share with each other, like, what made you feel loved over the prior week. So that's one thing. And then, like, go back to as if this was like on a first date. Enter some excitement back into it. Like, if you want to pretend like you're going to get engaged again, like, go propose at a restaurant, see what happens. Like, if, like, make it fun, change the dynamics up, but just get so curious and start asking all the same questions again. Like, you can ask a question day. There's tons of apps for this too. Like, of just like, what would you like to experience sexually? When do you feel most loved? What would be the most helpful thing for you in the relationship? What's the most frustrating? Like, just start asking all the questions and then just listen with curiosity of, like, how can I really get to know this person in front of me?
Yeah. Especially if you, just with the feedback that you gave, that we never get to know the same person again. It's always somebody different. That makes sense. I mean, we're always evolving, becoming new people. We go through different experiences that shape us. Even mental illnesses and mental health struggles can certainly start to shape us. And maybe we were experiencing a mental health issue when we started dating, and then when we got treatment, we're actually a different person for the better as well, which also can change up the family and relationship dynamics as well. So I love that connection. Let's see here. One thing I was going to ask is, actually, you may have already answered this one in many different ways, but Yeah, you've already answered a couple of these, actually. You're doing too good. You read my mind of what I was going to ask you. Let's see. If you were going back to relationships with kids, if you were going to try to build that connection with them, and say a parent's like, well, I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. Should I have these times that are set aside that I bring them in and we go into almost like an interview, and maybe that's good, but maybe that also can be a little like too professional feeling for kids, or a little intimidating, or if say a father wants to connect more with his son, and they're kind of distanced from each other, good relationship, but just not a real connection, actually.
Yeah.
How do you feel like they can incorporate kind of a routine to start building that? Because, dads or even moms, we've got jobs, we've got all sorts of things that are going on, and then kids have school and sports, and by the time everybody's home, everybody's wanting to eat, everybody's tired, we just want to kind of distance ourselves sometimes. Yeah. What do you feel like could be incorporated that could help build those relationships back? Should it be a dedicated time, or should it just be more aware, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I have several thoughts. Let me share experience, not for me parenting, but experience I know that's happened, and then a couple of questions you can ask, and then there's kind of a model maybe of how to think through things to approach some of these dynamics. So I worked at a higher level of care, like right out of graduate school, like in an intensive setting for young adults. And oftentimes they didn't want to be there. They were voluntold to be there, right? To be coming to therapy. And so they didn't want to talk to me. They didn't want to be in this space. And I get it. Like, I probably wouldn't have if I was them too. But, it takes a lot to be able to open up. And so sometimes it may not be saying or doing anything. So it was like, this individual didn't want to be in therapy. Like, they wanted to say a lot of 4-letter words to me and probably to their parents at that moment.
Yeah.
And it was pouring rain outside. Yeah. And they were just sitting outside in the pouring rain instead of coming in and talking. And so, just went out and sat in the rain with them. Didn't say a word. They didn't say a word to me. We just sat in the rain. And then after a long time, they just looked over and said, "Can we go inside now?" It's like, thought you'd never ask. Of course. Right? And for that individual, in some ways, they just needed to know that someone could sit with them in the pain, sit with them and meet them where they're at, no matter what. That they couldn't push them away, that they couldn't let the rain have them get angry or upset or try to fix them. They could just be seen. And so a question you can ask your kids, and this is true for any relationship. You can ask them, what is something that you would like me to understand that you feel like I don't get about your experience in life right now? And maybe they'll answer it, maybe they won't, but you can learn a lot from that question. And something else is you can get intentional in your relationships. You can ask them, what's one thing this week that would mean the most to you for me to be involved with or connected with? And then as a parent, as professionals, balance doesn't exist. We're always unbalanced. We're going to miss things. We're not going to be present in the moment they needed it. But we can prioritize those things. So then if it's need you to be at the basketball game or my soccer game, or I just want to color with you, then no matter what, you choose to fail, if you will, at all of the other things to be present for that one thing, because that's what they said matters most to them. And Arbinger, they have a model I think is helpful for parents, and even just relationships in general, but they'll talk about you got to start with, they call it getting out of the box, but in essence, do I have a heart at peace? Am I seeing other people, as parents? Am I actually seeing, my child as my child and loving them for who they are without the need to fix them, what's off from them in any way? I think, especially as parents, sometimes we're like, yeah, of course. But in the moment, it's like, why don't you just change this? Or if you could just do that, right? And however that comes out, But like, do I truly see them as a person in that moment? And if I do, right, are they in a spot where they're going to let me build a relationship with them? Where they're going to let me spend time with them? That they're going to answer these questions? And if they're not, then I can't force them to build a relationship with me. I need to sit in the rain with them. But also then I can look at and see who has influence in their life. Who do they have the best relationships with? And how can I build a relationship with those people? Whether that's like a teacher at school, certain friends they have, a different family member. And as you build a relationship with them just genuinely, you're going to have more influence in their life because that person has more influence in their life. And then you're also likely going to get to know more about your child in that way until they can get to the place to kind of open up to have you build the relationship, to spend time, to say, I'd like you to come to the game and you can be present. And then I think a lot of the work as parents is just listening, of just listening and just being with what they're saying, with what they're not saying, and a lot less of trying to teach them something, trying to explain something, right? There's moments of correction around, especially around safety, but a lot of it just comes down to like this guidance of how can I listen to help you feel loved and understood and have a relationship where in the moments when you really need it, I'm going to be the one that you reaches out to when, you know, kind of thinking, especially as you're a parent, no matter what age your kids are, but like, I think most parents would want, like, if my 17-year-old, when, right, they make a dumb decision or choice, I hope they feel comfortable calling me at 2 a.m. and says, hey, Dad, will you come pick me up? Like, I'm drunk or high with some friends right now, and I don't know how to get home. Like, that's the call I think parents would want to get. And how you show up in that moment matters a lot to keep that connection, to create safety instead of them lying or hiding things or, you know, problematic behaviors coming out. And those things may come out anyway. But that says a lot in those moments when you can have them reach out to you.
Yeah. Your response has such a big influence on how they're going to perceive you and themselves. The one thing that I love what you said is, you know, you didn't really say it necessarily, but the way you explain the situations is sometimes, I mean, we don't have to have the perfect thing to say or the perfect answer. I love just being able to just sit there and being with them. And I think allowing parents to have that permission of not being perfect and just sitting there and just being with them is probably one of the biggest ways that you can actually build a connection with your child. So I love that feedback. That's super good. So
yeah, for sure.
Man, this is pretty awesome. I'm loving this. Do you have other things that you wanted to talk about today or anything that you want to recap on or anything?
I mean, there's a lot of things I could keep going into talking about, like, depending on how much time you have and what you want me to dive into.
That's a good question. I don't even know what time it is or what. Haven't been watching and 2:40. How long did we say we were gonna do?
Roughly 40 minutes to an hour.
Oh, so it's kind of up to you. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I could talk to you all day long, actually, about some of this stuff. This is awesome. So, but do you have anything else that you'd like that was really on your mind that we wanted to talk about?
I think just like in the context of this conversation, like I think there's a couple things that can be helpful to talk about. Is one, like I've kind of alluded to these type of questions as we've gone through the conversation, but especially in like a romantic type relationship or if there's been trauma, and we've all experienced trauma in different forms in different ways. And I think trauma sometimes is an overused word and an underused word in our culture now. But the first question to ask yourself in a relationship is, am I safe? Am I physically safe? Am I emotionally safe? And if the answer to that is yes, the next question would be am I connected? Do I feel connected to myself? Do I feel connected to my partner? If the answer to that's no, that's what I should be focused on. How do we create connection? What does that look like? If the answer to that's yes, then it's what do I value? What would I like in this situation? And you can go through really hard things that are safe and connecting and aligned with your values, and it builds confidence. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go through things that are unsafe because it'll create trauma. You don't want to go through things that are disconnecting because that's going to bring out symptoms of anxiety and depression and self-betrayal. And you also don't want to do things that contradict your values. Like you end up with a lot of regret and pain. So that's kind of some key questions to kind of guide working through things and kind of taking out a lot of the clinical jargon of stuff that I think can be really helpful. And I think it's important too, like I started with this, but to talk about what abuse is. So this is like when I'm meeting with clients, like I'll often, depending on the context, how I do this will be different, but kind of break down the cycle of abuse of like there's an incident that occurs that could be, again, physical, emotional, sexual, financial, spiritual. And there's so many different ways that can happen. And then it's followed by this kind of guilt shame period that will look like, I'm so sorry I did that, or grandiose promises. I promise I'm going to go back to church. I'm going to be good. It's never going to happen again. Or blaming, like, well, if you hadn't have done that, or if the kids hadn't been so upset, or if work hadn't have been so stressful, then that wouldn't have happened. Or minimizing, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like you're overreacting, kind of some like gaslighty type things, right? And sometimes this is also followed by a pattern of a honeymoon period that things feel great. It's like, I see the potential here. I love this person. Why can't the relationship always be like this? And things feel good for a time, or at least they don't feel bad. There's not safety problems happening. And that's followed by then like some tension starting to build. Like we're walking on eggshells, we're managing emotions of other people, we're kind of afraid of what's going to happen until that tension builds over time, and then there's an incident that happens. And this happens in cycles, like it's a pattern that's happening over and over and over again. I'm not talking about someone had a bad day and you got home from work and you said something you regret, right? That could be a pattern and that could be part of that. But if that like resonates with what I'm describing with people of, that sounds like my relationship, or I'm not sure, that hits a little bit too close to home, like reach out for help. Like you're not alone. You matter. It's not your fault. You're enough. And you're able to find safety. You deserve that. And it's possible to experience that. And so I think that's just the other thing that's really important to share so that people don't end up in situations that they don't need to be in or don't have to be in. There's different options for them.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I was gonna ask you. One of the first questions you said was, "Am I safe in this relationship?" Yeah. Going right back to the beginning of that. Mm-hmm. What if somebody is physically safe, but maybe emotionally is not safe? So maybe there's invalidation or verbal abuse or whatever you'd like to say on that. But how do they? Is it? I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say is it worth trying to move forward with that? Or what would you recommend if they say no to that question?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's so many ways that can look like if we're talking about emotional and psychological abuse, right? Yeah. Someone may show up in a moment not as their best self. And that's different than maybe a pattern of things over time, but really it's individual to that person. What works for them, what doesn't work for them. But when you're looking at actual abuse, right, you're seeing patterns and tendencies. That's typically someone has deep shame, oftentimes unresolved trauma that they're projecting out on other people and trying to control other people or things around them because they feel out of control themselves. Mm-hmm. And they don't like themselves. They don't know how to regulate their own emotions to be present and do their own work. And so I believe people can change, right? I think when some of these patterns, those are really deeply ingrained, sometimes it's not that they can't change, it's that they won't, or that they're unwilling to, or maybe unwilling to do the work. They're unwilling or unable to sit in their own pain to work through the things that they need to create a different outcome. So for someone who may be in that type of dynamic, right, it goes right to boundaries. What do I need to keep myself in a healthy and safe place, physically, emotionally? And that's going to be individual to each person, but safety is the priority. And that would be something even to talk with a therapist or a professional of what does this look like? What do I need? Do I want to work on this relationship? Do I not want to? It's their choice, what they choose to do. But if, you're in a relationship I'm going to back up for a second. I think this is something else connected to abusive dynamics, but in general, I think you need to reflect to see, like, am I in love with the relationship that I'm in? If nothing changed over the next 5 years, would I actually be okay with that? Does this relationship work for me? Or am I in love with what the relationship used to be or what it was? Or am I in love with the potential of it, with the hope of what I think it could be? Because if I'm in love with the hope of it, or I'm in love with the past of it, neither one of those things are actually real. And so I have to see, like, right here in this present moment, this is the only connection that I have, and does this work for me? And how do I get myself to a healthy and safe place? And can people change? They can. It's hard, right? If those patterns are deeply ingrained, those are really hard things to change.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to ask you some of this. This question may seem like most people probably know it, but I feel like maybe it gets passed over a little bit more. So, say somebody's not safe in a physical relationship. Maybe he's not physically safe.
Yeah.
What should that person do? I mean, obviously, I would assume they should get out of it, but sometimes that's a little harder than we think, both psychologically and maybe even physically and environmentally. Maybe it's very challenging. So, what do you recommend in those kind of situations? That's a challenging thing.
It is challenging. Like, it takes someone on average 7 times. They'll leave 7 times before they actually leave, an abusive relationship. And safety is the priority. And so, like, if a relationship's good 95% of the time, but the other 5% you're getting punched in the face, that's going to get worse, not better, over time. Those injuries are going to compound. And if it's physical abuse, like, that gets really scary. And even if it's emotional and psychological, it could escalate to other things, potentially. And so assuring safety, it's like you need to build a safety plan. Like, there's domestic violence shelters. Where's places I can go where I'll be physically safe? What's access to, funds and social support and connections and food and, these basic necessities so that I can live and survive. And also, when there's kids involved, that gets really tricky. A lot of people may have fear of what's going to happen to my kids. And so seeking legal counsel and legal support. A lot of attorneys will give free consultations, or domestic violence shelters will also have, like, attorneys that can give some free counsel and advice there. There's a lot of good resources online, but when someone's in that type of dynamic, there is a high risk of, are they tracking you? What are they, And so, like, reach out for professional support. Like, you can call the domestic violence hotlines, and you're not alone. It's not your fault, and they deserve safety, first and foremost, and working with someone to help them build a plan on how to leave if that's their choice. If they're choosing to stay, like, how to be safe, because those are high risk periods too, like, of leaving a relationship. That's when there's a higher risk, I should say, for violence at times. And so don't try to do it alone. Get some help.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like there are people that are in relationships that they probably do feel like they're stuck and trapped. And when we talk about safety, there's different types of safety, like we've talked about today. There's emotional safety, and then there's physical safety. And, with the physical safety, obviously that, in my opinion, probably should take precedent, because we've got to get physically safe if we want our mental health to get better and those emotional connections to improve. But this has been pretty awesome. Do you have anything else that you'd like to talk about before we wrap this up a little bit?
No, I think connected to, like, even just providers and diagnoses and, like, things. Think of the context of relationships. This is a question I get oftentimes of, like, my partner struggles with OCD or anxiety or depression, right? And I think there's a lot of things that can be correlated or cause problems with that for someone in their life. And so there's option to get help, right? It's not therapy is just the answer. There's medication. There's so many different medical type interventions and things that can help. And so I think people just being open to, how do I get the best outcomes possible, I think goes a long way. And when you're in a relationship with someone who's struggling with, maybe it's, seasonal affective disorder, like symptoms of depression that come seasonally every year. You can't fix that for them. It does affect them. It does change things and dynamics within the relationship. And so being able to meet them where they're at, while also not having to allow that to hold the relationship hostage. Like, both people still have needs, and you can navigate that together and figure out, what does this look like for us to stay connected when, there's this storm of depression or storm of anxiety that comes in and wants to be part of our life and relationship at times. And so talking openly about that, not in a shameful way, but like, okay, how are we going to navigate? How do we actually continue to create the curiosity and the connection between us that can create a big difference in relationships as well, once we're not feel like we're fighting each other, but we're working together against something that's coming in. Because like, someone is not depression, right? So like, I may be struggling with general anxiety disorder, but I'm not anxiety. That's not who I am. So in relationships, I think when you can pull that out and see, like, how can we address this together and work through this in a way that works for us, it can be empowering instead of kind of feeling hopeless at times.
Yeah, I love that. So I love taking a kind of a team approach and recognizing what resources are available out there, because not one individual or one resource a lot of the times is going to be all that's needed, right? So even if we look in the physical health range of things, maybe there's some chronic physical health conditions outside of mental health even that could be playing into the relationship, or and then, as you said, I mean, with medications at times could be needed, individual therapy, family therapy, relationships, and then just, behavioral changes, getting out, doing something different than what's the normal, right? Just going out to the mountains or going to see a movie or doing something different, right? So there's a lot of different ways to actually become well and to improve relationships. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like we would love it to have like there's one thing that you need to do and then everything's fixed. But unfortunately, these situations are very complex, and they need some really in-depth looks to try to improve that. So I appreciate that.
For sure.
Was there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I don't know any other key thoughts coming to mind. It's been a good conversation, and appreciate your work and that holistic approach, because, I mean, people can improve their diet, sleep, and exercise. So many problems may not go away, but they're not going to get worse. They may get a lot better.
You're right about that. Trying to get down to the foundation of things. And I think that's what you, as a marriage and family therapist, is you really get down to the foundation of what actually helps relationships to feel connected and that true connection. So, Kyle, I really appreciate you taking the time to visit with me today.
Of course.
It's been very enlightening. So appreciate you sharing your expertise with Brainstoke and Levo, and seems like you're an incredible therapist, so appreciate it. So
well, thanks for having
me. The Lift and Make Lighter podcast is brought to you by Levo, a primary mental health care provider. At Levo, we specialize in comprehensive mental health assessments, diagnoses, and treatments for all ages. For more information, visit levomind.com. That's levomind.com.